I wish to acknowledge that we are here tonight on the traditional homeland of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, as well as settlers, migrants, newcomers, and those who were brought here involuntarily through the transatlantic slave trade. Together, under the dish with one spoon covenant, we share the responsibility for future generations. This evening's first speaker, Deputy Mayor Asma Malik, is the first hijab-wearing Muslim woman elected to the public office in Canada. Deputy Mayor Malik is known for staring down hate and inspiring inspiring hope for racial justice, economic reconstruction, and democratic renewal. As Toronto City Councillor and First Deputy Mayor, Asma brings her local knowledge and experience to be a champion for affordable housing, vibrant public spaces, improved public transit, and safer streets for everyone. And she has been an outspoken advocate for the protection of Ontario Place. I first met Asma at one of the many pop-up protests where she spoke passionately about a better future for Ontario Place. In person, the Deputy Mayor is very approachable and welcoming. She is a great listener and interacts with the public with genuine concern, patience, and thoughtfulness. Asma is proud to serve Ward 10, Spadina-Fort York, and the City of Toronto, and knows we can do more in Toronto to bring people in, not push people out. Asma's vision for Toronto is a green, just, and caring city. A Toronto that works for all of us, includes all of us, and gives voice to all of us. So, with that, Asma Malik. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? This is an incredible room, and this is a very excellent vantage point to see this entire room, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Steve. That was such a kind introduction, and I am so thrilled to be here with you all for the book launch of As It Is, a Precarious Moment in the Life of Ontario Place, and how much does that resonate with all of us? As was mentioned, my name is Asma Malik. My pronouns are she, her, and I am so proud to be Toronto's new Deputy Mayor, and even prouder to be the City Councillor right here in Spadina-Fort York, Ward 10, home of our Ontario Place. As we all know, this important contribution to the story of this acclaimed heritage and park space could not be more timely. It is so wonderful to be here among so many champions for Ontario Place. I would love to mention you all by name, but I will particularly point out Bill Greaves. His thoughtful contributions to the development application response has been invaluable, and I'm looking forward to his insight on this book. I also want to recognize Norm De Pasquale from Ontario Place for All that has been galvanizing the love, care, and commitment to that site. And there's so many more of you, and I'm looking forward to us being able to connect in this space as well. I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of quality time at Ontario Place over the years with my family, from the iconic Cinesphere to the discovery of the Pebble Beach, and spending that time there in a way that you can't in any other part of the city. My parents immigrated to Toronto 5 decades ago, and their love for our city's waterfront in every single season is one of my most enduring inspirations for championing an Ontario Place for all of us. I don't have to tell you that it is a treasured public space that holds a lot of memories for so many of us. And they're not just nostalgic memories. They're ones that are very alive. There are ones that we have made over the course of the pandemic when we discovered even more how precious our public and green and accessible spaces are. And most of all, when we know that our waterfront is critical to our climate leadership. And We know through that the possibilities that Ontario Place holds as well. That is why it's essential that the revitalization of Ontario Place prioritizes a welcoming, green, public space that is open and accessible to all. We are in a process right now, and I may have seen many of you at our in-person consultations or online earlier this week, and I said it there, and I said it before, and I'll say it again. We have got to get this right. You heard it again today. We are faced with a provincial government that wants to build over this visionary space with something that does not belong on our waterfront as it stands right now. And my commitment to you, to our communities, to communities right across the city and province is that we are going to use every tool that we have at the City of Toronto to fight this and work for our collective best interests on the waterfront. I got a chance to look through Steve's book, and Steve's book opens so many perspectives on the recent history of the landscape at Ontario Place. Points of view that we may have seen many times, maybe on one of those walks that we met at, but captured the images that invite us to contemplate the site in a different way, in a new way, to see it through a new perspective, to see new places and views that we may not have seen before, and through that, see what we love about it and also those possibilities. It is both a beautiful record of the thoughtfully designed features of this space, the layers of history in them, and the challenge to all of us to see them anew. John Lawrence, who has tirelessly followed, questioned, and challenged the province's development application. I'd love to give him a round of applause. He brings his storytelling and connective thread to these images in a way that takes us into the moment that is presented and how it connects to the current fight and the struggle that we have on our. And no landscape as intricate and layered with history can be assembled into a cohesive, beautiful whole without skillful curation. And we see that in action in this book through Maia-Mari Sutnik and Beth Kapusta. I'm sorry, I didn't ask how to pronounce her name, but I hope that's correct. In this book, I see a beautiful place for us to reflect, but most of all, I see it as an invitation to think about the past, present, and the future of Ontario Place, and the future of the public spaces that we hold dear. And this is where art and activism can intersect. In this book and here today, we aren't just celebrating documentation, but taking a call to action into the real world to fight for a vision and future of Ontario Place that is true to the public space on our waterfront and what it is meant to be. And the amazing thing is that we do not have to wait to respond to that call to action. We can do it right now. I encourage you to find the folks in this room who are putting that commitment, that care, that heart for this place, that reflection into action. I am an organizer at heart, so I have a clipboard here too and would love to be able to stay connected with you all. But most of all, and I want to end with this, I want to congratulate the author, the editors, you, Steve, and look forward to exploring these images and stories that you've given us and to see the many different ways that they inspire us for better in this city and a better world. Thank you very much.
What a great advocate for all of us. Thank you so much for that, Asma. Really, truly fantastic. And, frankly, personally, I'm kind of overwhelmed. Thank you. Thank you. Bill Greaves. I'll wait to get manipulated. Okay. Bill Greaves trained as an architect at Yale University and practiced in New York City for several years before turning his attention to conservation advocacy. He founded and directed the Van Mullivan project in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, an initiative to document and advocate for the conservation of an extraordinary collection of post-colonial modernist buildings in that country. The project continues now under Cambodian leadership. After returning to Canada, Bill began to advocate for the conservation of Ontario Place. In 2019, in response to the provincial government's announcement of plans to develop the site, Bill led a successful application to the World Monuments Fund to have Ontario Place, along with only 25 other sites around the world, included in its 2020 Watch program, which calls attention to at-risk sites of great heritage value. Bill is a founding member of Ontario Place for All and a former board member of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, where he leads up the Ontario Place file. He is also a co-chair of the Future of Ontario Place project, a research initiative led by the World Monuments Fund, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design at the University of Toronto. The rest of the time is incredible. He spends it as a ceramic artist. So please welcome Bill Greaves. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. The challenge for me speaking at the launch of such an excellent book about Ontario Place is that actually the authors have already said what I would hope to say, already shown what I would hope to show. I've read the book, and as I did it, I realized that I've been scooped. But that's actually okay, because I actually think one of the most important things to do at a book launch is to congratulate the authors and editors and contributors, and encourage everybody else to buy the book. So congratulations to Stephen, John, Maya, and Beth, and hopefully we've sold 100 copies already. You know, in particular, I was both scooped and moved by John Lawrence's really very elegant essay and the way that he uses ideas of place and publicness to craft a narrative that frames the history of Ontario Place, talks about the potential of its future, but as a reader in particular, there was just such a joy in being led through this narrative so elegantly in the way that he wrote it. So I encourage everybody to read that essay. It's one of the best pieces of writing about the site that I've read. So Stephen's photographs are equally elegant, and of course they're the heart of the book. And I was just struck by how he has this sort of cool and patient lens that looks at the site. It has that kind of documentary authority, but you also know that it's not trying to be a neutral lens, and you can tell that by the way that, and Asma referred to this as well, the way that he sort of curates the elements of the site that he wants to highlight. For example, I particularly noticed how he consistently and carefully uses the landscape to frame the buildings, and the buildings to frame the landscape, and that gets to the heart of one of the most important and threatened qualities of Ontario Place, which is that it was a place where architecture and landscape were designed together as a completely designed environment. It's actually very unusual. It's not like a typical urban place where you have layers of different, layers happening over time. This was all designed together at one moment in time, and you can still see that kind of beautiful connection between architecture and landscape in his photographs. I was also really moved by the way he looked at water and the way they wrote about water, because that talks about one of the most important things about Michael Huff's work was the way that he choreographed the various conditions of water with the landforms, with the currents, with the wind, so that you would get both experiences like kind of wild, you're out on the point on the West Island experiencing, the waves coming from Hamilton, but then if you're gathered in one of the villages, you have a more calm, where the water is calm, and you can have a sort of urban experience of gathering around the water in the steps that used to lead down to it. Or Michael Huff sort of invites you to sort of a solitary contemplative experience in the Central Canal, where again you're experiencing water in its protected, calm state. Or you can paddle across it in the lagoon. So I just noticed that there was one image that I found so moving, and it's actually not exactly an image of Ontario Place. It's the shot where you're looking straight down the breakwater at the very western end of the site, and you see the rough water coming in and hitting the breakwater, and the completely still water on the other side. I could almost hear that photograph in a way that I actually can and do hear Ontario Place when I go there, because I like to think of that site actually as it's almost a soundscape as much as it is a landscape. Because as you come across the bridges, the sort of urban sounds of Lakeshore Drive fade, and you start to hear the water in all of its different sounds. So you actually start to reconnect to the sounds that were there before there was a city, essentially. I do also want to just point out that a spa is a noisy, noisy building, and it's going to erase that landscape with its exhaust fence. But more on that later. I also found the images of the trees in winter very poignant, because it was like these sort of magnificent skeletons were revealed. The trees in those photographs look vulnerable, and they look like they're in need of protection. They are. And that's actually today, the minister, Kinga Surma, announced in a press release that they are imminently going to start cutting down those trees. That's news. So here's what you can do, and this is one of the most important things I can say tonight. Go to OntarioPlaceForAll/take action. You'll have the opportunity to put your phone number in there so that you can be contacted when it's time for direct action around this. I can assure you that Ontario Place for All is working they've actually put out a press release today and are working very hard and exploring all possibilities to respond to this, and you'll be hearing more soon. One of the best ways to hear about that, by the way, is to go to Ontario Place for All and make sure you sign up for our newsletter. So put your number in there. And so back to the book. I was also, I was just struck by how sort of efficiently and elegantly, again, I keep coming back to that word, and I don't mean elegance in terms of beauty, I mean elegance the way a mathematical equation can be elegant, and that this book really just has what you need and nothing more, is my experience of it anyway. So Maia's, I thought it was great how Maia just very efficiently connected Stephen's work to a sort of broader history of photography, and then also connected it to the rest of his body of work so that you could perceive the coherence of that work. So that's interesting because it helped us to look at the images more knowledgeably, but it also guides us to the right way to look at Ontario Place, which is to understand it in the context of a broader body of work, which is 20th century architecture and landscape design, and to make sure that we look for the coherence in the site, which, as you can see in the photographs, like I was saying, Stephen is really doing. So, I'll provide a little bit of context for this, although I think all of you probably know this. The National Trust, when they awarded Ontario Place the 20th Century Prize back in 2017, said it very well. They said, the site realizes in tangible physical form some of the most ambitious utopian architectural ideas from Europe and the United States in the 1960s. Now, what they're referring to in those ideas are the work of firms like Archigram, Superstudio, and Yona Friedman. But there's something really important to know about that body of work. Almost none of it was built. It mostly existed on paper. So Ontario Place is one of the few examples, and one of the most radical examples of that type of megastructure architecture in the world. And as George said when we interviewed him for the Future Ontario Place project, he said, if you have something like that, why would you keep it? In 2020, the World Monuments Fund included Ontario Place with only 25 sites from around the world in its watch program, further highlighting its sort of global importance. I also want to mention that it has received the highest possible level of designation from the provincial government itself under the Ontario Heritage Act. The designation specifies that Ontario Place is one of the most important expressions of late 20th century modernism in the history of the province. Now that kind of designation comes with rules. And unfortunately, the provincial government's actions over the past 3 years have made clear that they view Ontario Place as a piece of waterfront property to be commercially developed and not as a heritage treasure to be protected. But the Ontario Heritage Act is clear that when it comes to sites like Ontario Place, the provincial government must act as a steward and not a developer. Specifically, the Act states Ontario's cultural heritage resources belong to the present and future generations of Ontarians. Managing provincial heritage properties wisely is in the best interest of Ontarians. So, how should the government wisely manage this site, and what have they actually done to date? And I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit here, because this has been going on for a couple of years, but I just want to point out that under the OHA, what they should have done first was create something called a strategic conservation plan that would guide all future decisions at the site. Instead, a call for development was issued in 2019, and they specifically said that the entire site could be torn down. Now, they backed off after a public outcry and said that the Sinisphere of the Pods and Trillium Park would be kept. But this ignored the fact that Ontario Place is this unified composition of architecture and landscape. You cannot just carve it up and have it retain its value. It's the kind of approach that would have been precluded by a proper strategic conservation plan. Now, they didn't even start working on one or doing any of the associated consultations until development partners had already been picked. And then when that plan was produced, it was basically used to back justify decisions that had already been made. So this process has been wrong from the start. And what does this lead to? It leads to clear cutting a forest to build a convention center-sized spa right next to the Sinisphere and Pods, dwarfing them. It leads to building an enormous underground parking lot at public expense. Context. I just want us to think for a moment, what would we think if other governments treated their iconic modern waterfront sites like this? What if the government in Australia decided to raise the park next to the Opera House and put a giant spa on it, dwarfing and blocking that structure? What would the world think of such a decision? Okay. I'm going to go back to the book a little bit, and I want to stop and I want to thank Stephen in particular for taking the time to observe and record the site in such a personal way. Because, and this is something Asma alluded to, I feel like two reasons why I thought that was important. One, it reminds us that at that time it was a public site, and any of us could have gone down there with a camera and photographed it, and then had our own personal experiences of it. And by the way, everybody in this room probably has a story about Ontario Place. And I think it's one of the defining characteristics of truly important public sites, that there is that range and depth and number of experiences lodged in our minds. It's almost how you measure its cultural heritage value, I think. The other reason that I so enjoyed and appreciate Stephen's slow and patient documentation of the site comes from something Phyllis Lambert said, or actually one of her books. She said, "Observation is a constant that underlies all approaches." That was actually the title of her book of architectural images, which I hear as a call to ground our activism in a direct, specific experience of the values of the site. I mean, at least that's personally what works for me. I should re-energize myself by going down to Ontario Place and experiencing the water, the soundscape, the views of the Sinisphere framed by either a sloping hill or willow trees. So I would encourage everybody to visit Ontario Place to get re-energized in that way, and also to buy the book because it's also very inspiring. So when I spoke at City Council a while back, I asked the councillors, I said, I'd like you to can you think of a public site in Canada that's a more important contribution to 20th century architecture and landscape design in one place? I can't think of one. and you can't pick Expo, it's mostly gone. And then ask yourself, I said to them, ask yourself if you want to be part of a scheme to put a giant spa on top of it. So, in response to this process that seems to have gone so deeply wrong, Ontario Place for All has put together something called A Better Idea. I encourage you to go to the website. It's essentially an alternative vision for the site that is grounded in an appreciation for what is already there. And what is already there is there for us all to see by just going down and visiting that place. I think I'll stop there, and I'll just stop again by thanking Stephen and everybody involved in this book for giving us such a beautiful, beautiful object to enjoy.
Geez, I learned a lot about myself here. Thank you so much for that, and you know, that was quite moving and very, very provocative, and I hope people enjoyed that. So, when I started taking photographs at Ontario Place, I really didn't have a plan to produce a book. I hadn't been to Ontario Place, I hate to say, for quite some time, dozens of years in fact. And I could go and wax poetically about my experiences as a kid and as a parent, but I hadn't been there for quite a while. And it was the middle of the COVID epidemic. Curiosity brought me back to the shores of Lake Ontario, where I thought I would spend some time photographing the abandoned wilderness ride on West Island. It's just a thing to do, and I was escorted by Beth Kapusta and by my wife Cynthia. After an hour of photographing, I emerged from the woods, made my way out towards the East Island exit, and I could see that it wasn't just the ride that had been neglected. The entire place was languishing. The futuristic Zeidler buildings were rusting and gray. The modular buildings, once emblazoned with bright colors, were boarded up and decaying. And the Michael Huff landscape was degraded and suffering. Having photographed many other at-risk or abandoned places in my career, I knew there was a photographic work to be done here, and I began to document Ontario Place as thoroughly as I could. The photographs in this book show Ontario Place at a physical, political, and economic crossroads. It's a critical moment to record it comprehensively, to understand it as it was, as it is, and to thoughtfully consider what it might become. I want to thank the staff at Urban Spaces for organizing this evening's event and for preparing and providing this terrific space. You've done a great job, and I appreciate the work you've put into making this evening a success. I also want to thank both Swipe and Spacing for hosting the event and for being the executive retailers for As It Is. This is, I should note, this is a self-published book. I don't have a distributor, and it's rather limited edition of only 500 copies. So, at the risk of running over each other, I would warn you and recommend that you get it fast. To begin, thanks go to John Lawrence and Maia-Mari Sutnik for their incisive essays. Their words support and explain many complex issues that matter to me personally and to any reader who cares about urbanity, the environment, and the medium of photography. The meaning and importance of the issues raised by this publication are made clear with their genuine, heartfelt, and intelligent contributions. Beth Kapusta is a longtime friend and a confidant who took on the job of not just editing the text, but unreservedly advising and guiding me through the entire process of taking photographs, writing texts, fundraising, and publishing. I learned a lot from Beth. Her dedication and belief in this publication have been nothing short of extraordinary, and I'm delighted to say that after all of this, we remain to be best of friends. With an abundance of experience as a photographic historian, educator, and curator, David Harris, who could not be with us tonight, provide guidance and encouragement as we distilled hundreds of photographs into visually coherent story. His persistence through countless iterations, and I really mean countless, is a testament to his patience and commitment to the project, and for this I am completely in his debt. I've had the honor to be assisted by Ontario Place for All, a passionate group dedicated to protecting the legacy and environment of Ontario Place. Special thanks to Francesca Buon, Ken Greenberg, and Catherine Naismith for their interest, advice, and encouragement and assistance. We're almost there, folks. To old friends, new friends, colleagues, and experts for sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and goodwill, thanks go to Stuart Chan, Christopher Kaus, Carol Elder, Philip Evans, Samantha Irvine, Peter McCallum, Sandra Shaw, Becky Taylor, Quan Tai, folks at Spacing Magazine, as well as the intrepid Ontario Place swimmers. Yeah. I haven't dared do what these people do. But there's a picture there that will show you how brave they are. I also want to acknowledge the input from Walter Kem, who provided enthusiastic expert guidance about the planning and design of Trillium Park, and Paul Roth, director of the Image Center, and Ken Greenberg for providing much appreciated endorsements for my press release. Thanks also go to Lori Plater and Sunil Bhandari at Bhandari and Plater, who rose to the challenge of designing this book with creative enthusiasm, patience, and professionalism. And believe me, they were patient. The book looks just great. I'm really happy with it. I'm thrilled. Daniel Drabowski of Imaging Tree with meticulous but digital file finishing. Catherine Marchbanks finessed the text with her precise proofreading. And my gratitude also goes to the teams of Guy Poulin and Lucas Elka of Type A Print, and Doug Laxdal, Jeff Hale, and Jeremy Martin of the Gas Company, who ensured that the quality of the book met their collective high standards. And as I think you will agree, the printing and binding are just beautiful. The book has been funded by a partnership agreement with Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, and I want to express my appreciation to members Margie Zeidler and Vicki Rogers for their ongoing support in bringing this book to life, and for enduring far more emails than any human should have to be subjected to. I also wish to acknowledge the generous financial support of the following: Lynn and Joe DiStefano, KPMB Architects, Penny Rubinoff, Type A Print Inc., Christopher Varley, Morden Yallis, York Heritage Properties, Jane Zeidler, Margie Zeidler, and Woodcliff Properties. Thanks for putting me up here. Thanks also to my friends Colleen Clancy and Dieter Hestel, who print, frame, and exhibit my work at Helio Gallery, and plans are currently underway for an exhibition of the work later this fall. I can't express enough gratitude to Linda Myers for her kindness and gentle encouragement, and as always, love goes to my family, who support me unconditionally. How lucky can a photographer be? And finally, there is one more person I wish to thank again: Margie Zeidler. Margie's been an extraordinary help to me throughout this process of getting this book published. Her energy and passion for this project have been abundant, and her willingness and patience to share her knowledge and resources are inspirational. I'm honored to have had her support and truly value her friendship. We all owe her a debt of gratitude for her selfless advocacy for so many things that we all care about. Thank you, Margie, for making things happen. So this concludes the remarks for the evening. I truly hope you enjoy it as it is. For those who do not know yet, the book is on sale at Swipe and Spacing at the price of $49.95 plus tax, and that's, by the way, provincial sales tax. And with every purchase, you will receive one free drink ticket. So thanks so much for joining me this evening. Please enjoy yourselves for the rest Good night, thank you very much. And I'll be signing